The year was 1985, and a man named Yuji Horii had a dream. A dream to make an RPG that wasn't just a rip-off of D&D, to bring the genre into the mainstream, to make an accessible and fun game that could appeal to all. In order to accomplish this, he wanted the player to feel like they grew alongside the hero, making them stronger over time. Also, somehow he convinced Akira Toriyama and Koichi Sugiyama to help out with this, likely with money. A shockingly short time later, in 1986, Dragon Quest was released in Japan for the Famicom, or the NES. 3 years later, this game was localised in North America as Dragon Warrior, and in my country, the first time we got access to any version was in 2014. Really? Like, I'm writing the script on finding out this information and dang, that is late. 28-year gap? Really? That's older than me. Anyway, as a result of that, I played one of only 2 of the 11 versions of this game that have ever come out where I live. The version for Nintendo Switch, which I believe is just a port of the iOS version. Sure, I've played other games in the series before, like 9, 8 and 11, but I'd never seen where it began before, I've never experienced it. I'll just preface this by saying that I got lost a lot, but for the sake of this video I'll just generally cut that out. Upon selecting a new game, you're greeted with just an input for a word. I don't know, it's just weird, it doesn't tell you what it's for or anything, you just assume it's for your name. Anyway, I named the main character Aleph, ostensibly the closest thing the hero has to a canon name. We're then thrust into basically all of the plot this game wants to give us, exposited by the King of Tantagel. As a scion of the bloodline of Erdrick, we are destined to get the speed of light off of the Dragon Lord, some shut-in who wants to make it always nighttime, which is honestly understandable. To aid us in this quest, the king grants us a torch, 120 gold, and the key to let us out of his room, implying he would have simply kept us here forever otherwise. Now, one of the most notable things about this game is they only have one character. This was actually not what was originally intended by Yuji Horii, who wanted multiple party members, but was forced to adapt due to memory limitations of the hardware. As a result, the hero of this game does everything. He's the healer, the mage, and the physical attacker all in one, which is possibly what inspired main characters in RPGs to this day to be jacks of all trades. Another notable and neat thing is that right outside Tantagel Castle, across the water, we can see another, more foreboding castle, surrounded by a luxurious purple carpet. This is the Dragon Lord's abode, Charlock Castle, and it is the final destination of the game, visible right from the get-go to give players an immediate goal. Something to strive for, so that they know what needs to be accomplished. Close, yet unreachable. In contrast to that, the nearby town of Tantagel mainly exists just so that there's a shop accessible right at the start. I buy a dragon scale and can't figure out how to equip it. It's just not in my equip menu. For some reason this either has to be done through the item menu, making equip completely superfluous, or by pressing right several times on the D-pad in the equip menu, which the game gives no indication will do anything. Like, I know this was a game originally released in 1986, but come on, this version only came out in 2019. You could have added a couple of menu icons or something. Heading outside again, completely free to wander, we bump into what JRPGs are known most by, if not even defined by, a random battle. It's against this jolly little lass, a she-slime. Personally, I really like the way the battles just appear in front of the world map. I think it looks neat. A way to showcase the battle taking place in the world itself, rather than in some separate battle dimension like a lot of RPGs. I stab her to death and claim my spoils. 2 EXP and 4 gold. The battle is over incredibly quickly, probably to the chagrin of the composer, and we immediately return to the world map to continue our journey. Absolutely no time is wasted. I continue to wander, discovering that in fact I don't have as many directions to go as I had thought. What seemed overwhelming quickly became more obvious, and honestly, that's kinda just how this game goes. It seems overwhelming at first, but it's actually incredibly simple to figure out generally where to go next. A short while later, and I encounter my first slime, the mascot of the series. He generously gives me enough experience to get my first level up, available just 7 EXP in. This, in conjunction with the visible Charlock Castle, was intended to give players a sense of meaningful progress, as the level ups early in the game require very minimal EXP compared to the ones later on. Soon I arrive in the town of Galenholm, so named because it used to be the home of some guy named Galen. Currently this is nothing more than a rest stop in the middle of nowhere, but the townsfolk are kind enough to point me towards my next intended destination, Erdrick's Cave. This dungeon introduces something kind of awful, but also kind of okay. Darkness. You can stumble around in it, or you can light up a torch to find your way. Torches will dim over time, but that time frame is super generous, so it's really not going to be an issue. This dungeon actually serves entirely as an introduction to how darkness works, as there aren't even any enemies within. Which is weird, I won't lie. In fact, you don't even need to come here. All you find at the end is a stone tablet that kind of tells you what you're supposed to be doing as a Scion of Erdrick. Collecting 3 sacred artifacts from sages so that we can actually get to the Dragon Lord's castle. From there are no clear leads, so I attempt to voyage rightward, as there is a town over there. After crossing over a bridge, I run into a new enemy, a Dracolite, who proceeds to gently erase me from the gene pool. Death in this game was designed to not be too punishing, so all that really happens is we lose half of our gold and get sent back to the castle. However, we have discovered this game's main method of not lasting for about 10 minutes. Grinding. A necessary evil in older JRPGs that, despite having been mostly phased out today, is grinding for both experience and gold in order to get stronger and get better equipment. And this game, with how small the world is, demands a lot of the stuff. After leveling a couple of times and learning our first offensive spell, Sizz, I elect to battle another Dracolite, and Sizz is able to one-shot it. This grinding took around 5 minutes to change something from a guaranteed game over into a mere speed bump. Grinding may seem tedious, but in this game it's quick and it gives results. Unfortunately, those results are basically just another grinding spot, since Dracolites give more experience than the other enemies did, and I would like to be able to buy better equipment to not need to rely on a spell I can only cast 4 times. So it's not like the grind is over or anything. Once I level up one more time, I try again to cross the bridge, since now I know I can handle the enemies on the other side, and I make it to the town of Kol. An NPC here tells me about Rimmeldar, a town where a merchant sells keys, which I could then use to open the various locked doors I've seen around the journey. Another NPC informs me that Rimmeldar is to the south, and so we have a new goal. There's also a sparkling spot on the ground which turns out to be the fairy flute. What's the fairy flute, you ask? Well, we don't know yet. In earlier versions of the game, this required later NPC information in order to find, but here it's just so visible that you can just pick it up now without even knowing what it does. Ignoring Rimmeldar for now, I head west first and find a shrine with an old man in it. He reveals to be holding one of the 3 sacred artifacts I require, the Staff of Rain, but first wants a harp for some reason. The harp can be found in Gellenholm, but I'll need one of those keys first. Still, it's good to have another lead for when I'm done with our current one, and this one even puts us 1/3 of the way towards our goal. On the way to Rimmeldar, I encounter the Quagmire Cave, steeped in poison. Much like Erdrick's Cave, this place is dark, but unlike Erdrick's Cave, there are actual monsters here. It's basically just a straight shot south to get to the exit, as there's not anything else to do here yet. The enemies are stronger on the southern continent, but the power disparity is no longer an issue, and Rimmeldar is close by. The shopkeeper there sells weapon and armor upgrades for frankly ridiculous prices, but there is not a key to be found. Some NPCs tell me that Erdrick combined the sun and the rain to create a bridge to Charlock Castle, and that apparently there is a secret passage behind the Dragon Lord's throne, but still, no keys anywhere. That's because the key salesman is actually hidden around the outside of town, and I need to barely avoid the exit barrier to get there. This makes no sense in universe, but it's neat to discover the first time. Since I'd rather not have to come all the way back here, I choose to stock up fully on as many magic keys as he'll let me buy. Now that I have at least one magic key, I return to Quagmire Cave and find a door to unlock. Beyond it is a dragon with a fancy red carpet. This is one of the few times this game has a boss fight, and frankly the dragon totally destroys me, even as Brave Aleph tries to make a tactical retreat. My equipment just isn't up to par since I basically haven't upgraded my armour at all yet. Checking out the left side of the map while grinding, I discover the ruins of Damdara and immediately get scared by a green dragon, since they apparently populate this place. I immediately leave, deciding I'm clearly not meant to be here right now. I may have grown a lot since that Dracolite, but overall there are still monsters in this world that I am no match for. A long while after our last bout, I return to face the dragon once more. The one in the cave. Not one of the many in Damdara. At this point I'm much stronger and have better equipment, and a lucky crit at the start of the battle just helps me to strike down the beast sooner. It turns out that the dragon held Princess Gwaelin captive, and so I take her back home to Tantagel. The king is grateful, Gwaelin confesses her love to me, and she gives me an item that lets me know exactly how many tiles away I am from the castle. Thanks. While I'm in the castle anyway, I use some magic keys to explore more of the place, and indeed there's someone selling more. Provided you have at least one on you. That's tedious, but at least I don't need to go back to Rimmildar unless I mess up. I also notice a staircase headed down that couldn't be accessed before. Heading down it, I find an old man who gives me the Sunstone. This is one of the 3 sacred artifacts I heard so much about earlier, finally within my grasp. One step closer to the Dragon Lord. And I even know exactly where the Staff of Rain is, too. Finally unlocking the door in Galenholm that leads to Galen's tomb, I'm able to head inside. It's, fairly clear from the enemies here that I was meant to do this before the dragon, but oh well. For the tomb of just one guy, it's large and very maze-like, but eventually I do find my way to the bottom, where the lyre resides. Having pocketed the lyre and feeling no remorse whatsoever for grave robbing just to satisfy an old man, I'm able to return to his shrine and collect the Staff of Rain, the second of the 3 artifacts. Lacking any other real leads, I head to the final remaining town on the map. However, attempting to enter greets me with the Golem, another boss fight. The Golem is the purpose of the fairy flute from ages ago. It puts him to sleep whenever it's played and makes the fight trivial. Since hitting an opponent doesn't wake them up, it's purely based on time. However, it's actually quite annoying to get the sleep to stick, despite this being his intended weakness, as he just keeps waking up on turn 1. Eventually though, like all other foes in my path, the Golem falls, and I'm able to enter the town of Cantlin. While there isn't actually much here, there is a man who tells me that I should stand exactly 70 paces south and 40 paces east of Tantagel Castle to find a mark. It's lucky that Gwaelin gave me something to help track that. Before that though, I return to the ruins of Damdara, now that I can handle the enemies there. Now able to actually explore the place, I spy a sparkly spot on the lower right side of town. Approaching said spot causes me to encounter what I actually believed to be a random enemy, but is actually the game's 3rd boss fight, the Knight Aberrant. He uses snooze and hits somewhat hard, and whoops, the fight's over already. Yeah, I don't know, this guy's just really weak compared to the other 2. The sparkly spot he was guarding turns out to be Erdrick's armour, the best armour in the game, sporting high defense, fire resistance, immunity to damaging tiles, and recovering HP with every step. It's nice, but it's not necessary to save the world. That distraction out of the way, I begin the search for the mark, using the princess's pledge to figure out exactly where I need to stand. I discover it to be within a poisoned swamp, and the mark of Erdrick is mine. The 3rd and final of the 3 artifacts, and the last piece of the puzzle needed to get into the Dragon Lord's castle. Now all that's left to do is to head south of Rimmildar, to one final shrine, and have an old man take the mark and combine the Staff of Rain and the Sunstone to create the Rainbow Drop. Finally, I'm able to go forth unto my destiny. I hold the Rainbow Drop aloft and that's it. A wooden bridge? Seriously, this entire quest has just been to do something a carpenter could have whacked out instead? It couldn't at least have been made of light? Well, regardless, I now have access to Charlock Castle itself, and it is indeed foreboding. An 8-floor dungeon filled with mazes in the dark, inhabited by the strongest enemies the game has to offer. But they're nothing compared to me anymore, not after my bridge building exercises. However, I could still do with one final power increase. Deep within the maze, hidden away by the Dragon Lord, I find Erdrick's sword, the strongest sword in the game. After stumbling through many floors of darkness and ending up deep underground, I find the Dragon Lord's true castle. And indeed, from here, I can see the man himself, in a parallel to my ability to see Charlock Castle from the game's very beginning. Only this time, my journey will be much shorter, as I need only go around the outside of this room to reach him. The confrontation has arrived. In a last-ditch effort, seeing that I am the hero who will be able to strike him down, the Dragon Lord attempts to make a deal with me, and offer me half the world if I help him to conquer it. You actually can end the game here if you so desire, but that's not what a true chosen one would do. And so, having been rejected, he attacks me, like a violent teen 2 weeks before prom. Overall, he doesn't do that much damage, but he is able to heal himself up. Still, for a hero of legend like myself, he puts me to sleep and then kills me. Whoops. I should have healed sooner. Okay, take 2. This time it goes a lot better, and I manage to strike down the fiend. Thankfully, I still have a lot of MP remaining, as well as a decent amount of my HP, as it turns out that wasn't the Dragon Lord's true form at all. Apparently this was the first game ever made with a multiple phase boss fight, and I guess it's up to you whether you like that or not. Personally, I think it's actually a really cool fake out that a lot of players probably weren't expecting back in the late 80s, even if we're more used to the idea now. The Dragon Lord gets unique battle music in this phase, truly confirming that this is the last fight. The next attempt will be the last fight. Okay, anyway, let's ignore that. One big issue with the way this fight works is that while agility does exist as a stat, turn order still feels somewhat random. So it is completely possible to end up in an unlucky situation where he does way more damage than you expected. You try to heal, but then he hits you again before you can and takes you out. It's a shame that's where most of the difficulty in this fight comes from, but I guess with every battle being a one-on-one, there's not much more choice for how to do things. The fight itself can still be somewhat hard, but in honesty, it's usually fine if you don't get unlucky. And there goes the battle! I take the Sphere of Light from atop the Dragon Lord's staff and hold it aloft to remove the darkness from the world. All poison from the world map has been replaced with flowers, there are no more random encounters, and NPCs have much more positive dialogue. However, to get my ending, I must talk to the King of Tantagel. I like this a lot, you get to actually experience the peace you made in the world. Why is this not a thing in more RPGs? Anyway, the king says I'm great, and offers to give me his kingdom. I refuse, saying I'd rather rule a land of my own. I go to make tracks, Gwylin runs out to join me in marriage, and the credits roll. Overall, I actually really enjoyed this game. It took me just over 5 hours from start to finish, and I had no idea what I was doing. As the prototypical JRPG, it's actually really interesting to me that it's basically a puzzle game with a battle system, as you need to figure out where to go to get where you need to save the world, but there aren't really roadblocks other than tougher enemies. For what it was, I really enjoyed my time with it. The grinding was actually quite relaxing since battles don't last for very long, and I love the sense of progression you got in just those few hours of game time, going from enemies in one area being completely unsurpassable to later on being able to cut through them with ease. It's this sense of growth you just can't get from a longer game. One thing I never got a chance to say while playing though is that the version I played does not have a good handling of sprite work. The overworld sprites are at a different pixel thickness from character sprites, and it just looks really badly made as a result. The characters are too detailed for the world they inhabit, and this actually really bothered me. Anyway, as for rating this game, I'll give it a 7 out of 10 for what it is. It's not for everyone, but it is short and enjoyable, and it's fascinating to see where an entire genre basically began. I'm ignoring the fact that this version came out in 2019 for this rating, since I don't think that's indicative of this game as a whole. This is definitely a game I would play again. In fact, I took so long to make this video that I did play it again, and now have second place on the speedrun.com leaderboard. I did have first for a time, but I lost it. This is an RPG whose speedrun relies on pure skill rather than luck, and maybe you'd like it for that instead of for its historical value, although that statement does only apply to the Switch version. Anyway, that's all. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment if you enjoyed the content, and yeah, just have a nice day.